Moderator 166, Grant Barclay. We are all in place. I simply want to say thank you to the Procedure Committee and to you, Moderator, for permitting legal questions to report today. I should say this is the only remaining clean clerical shirt I brought with me. But given the time and the pressure of business, I wonder, Moderator, if it would be acceptable both to you and to the Assembly if I were to omit all the comments I was proposing to make in relation to the report, taking that as read, and instead move straight to my concluding comments. These are things which I really would like to say to the Assembly on this last occasion which I have as convener of the Legal Questions Committee, and I hope that might speed things up.
That's very gracious of you, sir.
I know that church law may well be criticised for apparently inducing delay and complexity in a common life which should be marked by grace and some fleetness of foot. And so I want to offer a slightly different perspective. The Church was able to respond timelessly to events which could not have been foreseen through the COVID pandemic. When widespread and significant restrictions on assembling physically were imposed by national law, it was through church law that a flexible but robust governance process was provided which enabled decision-making, albeit in a quite different form, to continue to support the life of congregations and the wider church. Substantial innovations to practices in the General Assembly and now in other courts have been developed through church law. They provide flexibility while ensuring that decisions are taken securely and can therefore command confidence. Church law has enabled the whole Church to give practical expression to the concept of constrained difference in an area of challengingly divergent thinking after a conceptual foundation was laid quite properly by the Theological Forum. The Legal Questions Committee offered a practical application, and it did so by means of church law. In these areas and in others, church law has proved that it can act speedily but carefully, can offer flexibility whilst retaining valued and valuable principles, and that it offers a foundation for progress while providing at the same time necessary protection. Our approach to law as a church has made this possible, but it has only been achieved through the dedication of officials and members of staff it has been my privilege to work alongside for these past years. And so I want to pay tribute to the efforts of my colleagues, in years few of which could be described as routine. The support of Christine Patterson to the work of the Office of the General Assembly, the Legal Questions Committee, and to legal aspects of presbytery life is almost impossible to overstate. In expressing my thanks on behalf of the committee to Christine, I note with some vicarious relief, given that I'm a presbytery clerk, that Victoria Linford's legal knowledge and her experience as a clerk too will support clerks in their future work. The insight of Fiona Smith as principal clerk has been of considerable assistance to the committee and to the broader church this past year. I'd argue that church law is one expression of faithful obedience and is one way we express our care for others as we all live to an agreed set of principles. Church law promotes equity, for we all stand under the same law with no special treatment for those who are particularly well-resourced or well-connected or articulate. Church law can be a tool to preserve good practice and capture wisdom gained over years of experience and reflection. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, has said that church law begins, and I quote, from that basic affirmation of equity, which is the fact of membership in the body of Christ. He also said that church law's purpose is to offer clarity about who may do what and who is answerable to whom, because every Christian has to know how to work out their responsibility to God within the context of various relationships and obligations they are involved in. Moderator, the committee has sought to fulfil its responsibility to make church law readily accessible, generally understandable, and practically useful, so that it might help us all to act justly and exhibit love in our dealings with one another, serving as Jesus commands. I accordingly present the report, and with some trepidation, move the deliverance. I say that because I was planning to move sections 1 and 3 to 6, section 2 already having been approved. But I see in the online hub that there are 2 notices of motion in relation to section 2. I would not wish those to be omitted, Moderator, and therefore seek your guidance in navigating them.
Thank you very much. Convener, is that seconded? Report seconded? Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. We have 3 questions listed here. I'll just take them in order. Andrew Gardner, you know your way to the microphone by now. Martina Bacon, and then Derek Browning.
Thanks for your report, Convener. Gardner 322. It's a question about the increase in the numbers proposed in the report on legal bodies from 20 to 30. I've given you notice of this. I just wanted to get some background as to why that's happening, or why we're proposing it.
Convener.
I'm grateful to Dr Gardner for giving me advance notice. The proposal is that the number serving on the judicial panel be increased from 30 to 30 from the current 20. There are a few reasons for this. There is a need to ensure that members of the discipline tribunal are from a presbytery which is different from that which is bringing the case, and of course with the reduction in the number of presbyteries that presents some challenges. There also needs to be the assurance that there are no conflicts of interest, that is, that no members of the tribunal have any knowledge of the respondent, and again that can be challenging. There needs to be, where possible, a gender balance. Each of the panels needs to have at least 1 minister member. Some of the panel members, on being approached at various times because of other commitments, are unable to serve. And I should also add, sadly, that the pressure of work has produced some challenges in populating these various tribunals, and therefore the feeling is that having a greater pool, which is what the increase from 20 to 30 really achieves, will make it more readily possible to populate these tribunals as they are required.
Thank you.
Okay. Martina Bacon.
Microphone 83. Martina Bacon, Commission number 578. Is consideration of a change to standing orders so that youth reps are given the right to vote in the future plans of the work committee?
Well, Moderator, in fact, they are. If I may just say that at the General Assembly in 2020, the Legal Questions Committee was instructed to work alongside others to review the arrangements for presbytery youth representation at the Assembly and report to the General Assembly of 2024. I'm so relieved that that date is a year from now, and your question helpfully reminds the Legal Questions Committee that this work is still on its agenda. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your question. Dr Browning.
Moderator Derek Browning, 004. My question relates to 10.6 and to do with the Barrier Act. The convener in his speech mentioned Rowan Williams talking about the fact of equity and recognising that the Barrier Act, like the whole of the church, is going through a period of flux at the moment. It seems to me that there is inequity at the moment in the way the Barrier Act may operate, given that not all presbyteries have united and some presbyteries are outside larger presbyteries. Can the convener guarantee that his successor and the committee will continue to keep the Barrier Act under review, because 10.6 does seem to be rather final?
Moderator, in responding to Dr Rowling, I would say that all matters always remain within the purview of legal questions to consider. I don't wish to tie the hands of my successors on the committee, and therefore I would not be guaranteeing that they shall bring to next year's Assembly any fresh proposals. Commissioners will see that the matter has been given some fairly detailed consideration over the past year, but I would want to give the assurance that this matter shall be kept under review. Clearly, any potential injustices could be resolved not so much by changing the Barrier Act, but by completing the work of presbytery reform, and therefore it is within that broader context that I would seek to give that kind of assurance.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr Browning. We then move to the sections of the deliverance. Section 1, receive the report. I don't have any names to speak. Is that acceptable? And online? I'm going to ask the Principal Clerk to explain what we do about Section 2 being in brackets having been approved. We just move on to the new Section 3, is that right?
Correct.
Thank you for that. So we move beyond Section 2 because we approve that on an earlier day. We're now on to 2 new sections 3, and this comes in the name of Scott Paget.
Oh, Moira.
No.
It's changed. Moira.
Mo-
Moira Taylor Wintersfield.
Right, Moira, you're on. First of all, is it seconded? Where are you, Moira? Seconded, right?
Mic number 82.
There we are. Sorry, I couldn't see where you were.
Sorry, Colin.
Yes. Can I just ask, before we go any further, I just want a nod or a shake from the convener whether that's something you're willing to accept. In that light, that may temper how long you want to speak.
Yes. I've got
But
it.
we have to have it read first by the
Sure.
principal clerk.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Insert a new section number 3 and renumber. Instruct the Assembly Business Committee in consultation with the Legal Questions Committee and the Faith and Nurture Forum to consider the issue of representation within the General Assembly of candidates in training and probationers, including the possibility of voting rights, and to report to the General Assembly of 2024.
So would you like to say anything, given that the convener is willing to accept? You're very welcome. You have a right.
I've written some stuff down because...
So you have to say it.
So not to be verbose. I've been itching to say it for such a long time.
On you go.
I'd like to add familiarisation candidates into that as well, though, actually.
That would be an amendment.
Yes. But
So-
anyway, I'll say, by far the majority of candidates in probationer now are mature, bring a wealth of life experience and professional experience, as well as lay ministry and often MDS experience, which remains completely untapped. The overwhelming experience of those in training is that of being disempowered, patronised and overlooked by the national church. The church is, in my opinion, so much the poorer and missing the voices of those who have come into ministry at this time of flux, expecting to work in team ministry and in new ways, yet are not being consulted, and furthermore are often treated as green newbies with nothing worth hearing. Last year, I was in the General Assembly Gallery listening to the Faith Nurture Forum report that talked about consultation that just simply did not happen, but I had no voice at that time. I just believe that we need the voices of those in training and youth reps to be valued and indeed sought as perhaps having more insight than those who have been in the system for longer. The wisdom of experienced ministers is undiminished by this request. I've got a huge, deep appreciation for the wisdom that's been shared with me by supervisors and others, other colleagues in ministry over the years, many of whom are in this room. But I just think that the wisdom of those in training, probation, familiarisation, and these amazing young people needs to be sought when we're looking to make changes to the church that are so wide-sweeping. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I have 2 people who want to speak on this before we move any further and hear from the convener. First of all, I've got Darren Jalland and then Michael Goss.
Darren Jalland, 403. Thanks, moderator. Did I hear that the convener was actually happy to accept this? Because if
You
so,
did.
I'm more than happy to go back to my seat and get us closer to our dinner.
We're delighted. Michael Goss. It's not your age we need.
Thank you, moderator. I did think of a retort there, but I shall swallow that one.
Can we have your number, please?
My number is 324, Michael Goss, and I'm not content with this motion, particularly as it seems to be being proposed that it's being extended even further. Commissioners are commissioned by presbyteries, and these persons in training are not yet members of presbytery. I think there's a lot of complication in trying to just do this. I think it would be very good to look at probationers who are already therefore within the presbytery system, and that might be something that would be useful to be looked at, but I would oppose the motion as it currently stands. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Goss. No one else is... Oh, yes, we have Kwame Halaga.
Number 81. Mike, thank you. Haliga 220. Thank you, Moderator. I didn't really envisage seeing myself speaking for the second time during this General Assembly, but I think I've been moved to. I want to support the motion based on my own experience and also the conversations I've had with familiarization candidates. I have lived in the UK for a decade. I've been in ministry. I have taught theology, having completed my PhD. But immediately I applied to join Church of Scotland. Through the familiarization process, I felt like a novice, that all my experiences did not count. And at some point, I really did not see a direction through the familiarization process. So I think there is a need to have a real look at especially familiarization candidates who are coming from various areas with years and years of experience. I have been in ministry for 24 years on about 4 continents. And I think that I can contribute more to the church. But I have spent a whole lot of time observing and learning and learning and learning and hoping that the gift that we bring to the church will be taken into account when we are in the familiarization process. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask the convener, does the mover of the motion, Moira, do you want to add anything to what's been said? I think your verbal comment about familiarisation candidates, if this is carried, legal questions have heard that and they can include that in the report. Convener, and we're going to have to take a vote because there's someone's expressed unhappiness about this, but you're allowed to speak, fine? Of course you are.
Very quickly, Moderator, thank you. Simply to say that Commissioners will see from the Assembly Business Committee report that there is a commitment there to meet with probationers soon after the Assembly, and I'm sure that those on familiarisation shall be included. To deal with Mr Gossie's point, the verb is to consider the issue of representation. It's not actually about appointing pseudo-commissioners, and so I think Mr Gossie's point may very well be well made next year when the actual proposals come. So I don't think there's any particular prejudice there. And those of you who are eagle-eyed and looking at this section will see that not only is the retiring convener often keen to give his own committee work, in this case, we're passing it principally to the Assembly Business Committee. And therefore, it is with some relief that I'm quite happy to accept this.
Can I ask Mr Goss, are you happy with that reassurance so that we don't need to take an electronic vote? Delighted. I apologise now for my age. You're obviously 27, not 72. Is the Assembly happy to accept this new deliverance section 3? And online? Thank you. I think we now have a second new deliverance. Scott Paget. Scott, have you got a seconder for it?
Yes.
And can I ask again the convener whether this is something they're willing to accept? Or, you're willing, so he's willing to accept it, but we need to hear it read out by the Principal Clerk.
Thank you, Moderator. Insert a new section 3 and renumber. Instruct the Assembly Business Committee in consultation with Legal Questions Committee and the Faith Nurture Forum to consider the issue of youth representation within the General Assembly, including the possibility of voting rights, and to report to the General Assembly of 2024.
Mr Paget, you're welcome to speak, but if you feel comfortable that the convener is happy, then you might want to keep your comments brief.
All I want to say is just know this was brilliant.
Thank you. Can I also just say that the Assembly Business Committee were happy both the last deliverance and also with this one. They're mentioned in both. Do you have anything finally to say, convener?
No, Moderator, thank you for that clarification. I should have mentioned that on an understanding I'm happy to accept.
Is the Assembly happy to accept this new Section 3? And online? Thank you. So we now move to the original Section 3. I see no one wanting to speak to this. Is the Assembly happy with this section of deliverance? And online? Section 4. Again, no names. Are you happy to accept this? Online, thank you. Section 5 is a new deliverance being brought by?
Fran Henderson.
Brian Henderson. Fran Henderson. Fran.
Hello, Moderator. Thank you.
If you give us your name and number, and then tell us
Henderson.
whether it's seconded or not.
Henderson, number 384. I have a seconder who is online,
Okay.
Mr. Jim Donald.
And just before you move, I need to ask the convener, is this something you are comfortable with, or?
Yes, I'm prepared to accept it.
You are prepared to accept it, but let's ask the Principal Clerk to read it out while Dr. Henderson decides whether she wants to limit her comments or not.
Thank you, Moderator. Insert at new Section 5 and renumber. Instructs the committee to consider what revisions to church law might be required in light of the introduction of team ministry in terms of the Presbytery Mission Plan Act 2021 and report with proposed legislation, if applicable, to the General Assembly of 2024.
Dr. Henderson.
Thank you, Moderator. A little bit of explanation about what that is about is simply that, as many of you will know, in the parish of Shetland, we are a union of 13 former parishes with a team ministry of 6, 3 of whom are ministers of word and sacrament. Faced with a vacancy in one of our 3 charities, the Kirk Session voted in October to depart, and that now stands as our collective decision, and there's no appetite to revisit it soon. But as they say in letters to the press, imagine our dismay when we realised that were another minister in the team to demit or retire, we would have to hold this vote again, perhaps twice within a year. I raised this concern with the Principal Clerk earlier this year, and I'm grateful to the Legal Questions Committee that they have adjusted the duration of the Kirk Sessions decision to 5 years in most instances. That has bought us some time. But even after 5 years, the situation remains very problematic for a team ministry. Say we appoint Minister A, who is indeed in a same-sex marriage or civil partnership, then when the vacancy process rolls round after 5 years, they will be obliged to read out edicts effectively against themselves. That is plain cruel. Imagine this time the vote goes the other way. Their position will technically be protected, but they could well see it as untenable. And moreover, what if the new minister, the next one who's been elected under the new decision not to depart, then also wishes to enter a same-sex relationship? Minister A is able to marry a same-sex partner and continue in their post, while Minister B, in exactly the same parish and on the same ministry team, is absolutely prohibited. Now, while that is the issue currently in our minds, it's just one example of the kind of problems that arise when church laws, which have been designed for one parish with one church and one minister, are applied to a situation of one parish with multiple charities and multiple ministers. Some other examples that have arisen for us: when a vacancy arises and an interim moderator is appointed, what is their remit, given that there is still a minister in the parish able to moderate Kirk Session? What if 2 charities become vacant at once? Do we then need 2 nominating committees, or can one committee search for 2 or more ministers? And beyond vacancy business, if Minister A is asked to conduct a baptism in Minister B's pastoral charge, does Minister B have the right of refusal or not? They're both ministers of the whole parish. What about weddings, including same-sex? And currently, one minister only is designated parish minister and has sole responsibility for moderating Kirk Session. There's no option to rotate. So in the light of these complexities, I'm asking the Legal Questions Committee simply to give the matter of team ministry more thought before any proposed legislative solutions unintentionally create more problems. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you very much. I have a name, Conor Fagan, who wants to speak to this matter.
Thank you, Moderator. Conor Fagan, 285. I just wanted to speak in support of this motion, so I'm going to be very brief. I'm
great.
Eagerly looking forward to being part of the team ministry, but I share the concerns that Fran has, and in particular, I wouldn't want to offer any advice to the committee, but I would encourage them to view this issue of the moderator of the Kirk session as a particularly thorny constitutional issue, I think, that will arise in the coming years. So that's one thing I would commend to the committee, really, to consider how that might be dealt with. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. I have no other names. Convener.
Thank you, Moderator. Now that the Assembly has voted through Section 4, I can say to you that as we did this work, we recognised that we were really offering some kind of workaround in one particular situation, and so I'm grateful to Dr Henderson for having brought this to the committee's attention. This is not an issue in relation to Act 1 or matters which pertain to those sorts of issues only, as we have just heard. The issue is how the Church deals with team ministry, where the conceptual framework to date has largely been one minister alone in one charge. And so, rather than offer piecemeal reform of legislation on an ad hoc basis, it seemed much more sensible that the Legal Questions Committee be given the task of looking at the range of issues where the introduction of team ministry to ministry generally in the Church of Scotland might require church law to be changed. This seems to me, and I think to Dr Henderson, to be a more robust and thought-through way of addressing what is an important issue, and therefore the committee is happy to accept this.
Okay, the committee are happy to accept. Is the Assembly happy to accept? Both in the House and also online. Thank you. Thank you, Dr Henderson. We didn't realise the complexities of Shetland. We just thought it was multiple murders you had to deal with. We go on to Section 5 of the Deliverance. There's no one wanting to speak. Is the Assembly happy with this? And online? Section 6. There's nobody wanting to speak. Is the Assembly happy with this? And online. Yes? We have a new Section 7.
Mr. Stuart Shaw.
In the name of Mr. Stuart Shaw. Right, can I just check, first of all, that you've got a seconder?
I do have.
Can I ask whether, and the convener is willing to accept, but let's hear what the deliverance is, and you can decide how short you want to speak to it.
Thank you, Moderator. Insert a new Section 7. Instruct the committee collaboratively to review the complaints process, seeking views of presbyteries and congregations to find ways of alleviating the stress, strain and hurt of those involved in the process, and report to the General Assembly of 2025.
Moderator, I had all of that to say. Like the convener, I will just have my closing remarks. Complaints procedures should be about justice, fairness, caring and love. It should reflect the love of the parent to the child. It should reflect God's love to his people. It should not be about winners or losers. It should be about compassion and caring and restoration. It should be rooted in the love of Jesus Christ. Moderator, that is all I wish to say.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. There's no other name down. Convener.
Moderator, I'm grateful to Mr Shaw for having given us notice of this. We are aware that the complaints process would benefit from review, and so I'm delighted to accept this instruction.
Are the Assembly happy to accept that instruction? And online? Thank you. We have a name against, before we move to deliverance as a whole, we have a point of order or a comment or something from Lynn Robertson. Lynn. Oh, you're online, your camera's working. We see your enigma. Please speak. Are you hearing us, Lynn? Lynn, I'm very sorry. We seem to have lost you. So I think for the sake of... She's unmuted. Okay, Lynn.
Right. I want to speak on the readers solemnising marriage section. For some reason, it has disappeared from my copy of the reports. I declare an interest because I am a reader in the church. And I want to point out that, you know, I was delighted to see that the report says that marriage is not a sacrament within the Church of Scotland. Marriage, the whole issue of readers and what they can do, the readership has developed from when John Knox first established the readership. Initially, the readership was men who were sent out to read somebody else's sermon. It has now developed into readers produce their own sermons. It has gone on, readers don't just do Sunday worship, readers can conduct funerals. Well, if we can be at the end of life, surely we can also, in being reformans, semper reformanda. Can I ask the convener, and I promise you, Grant, I won't fall out with you at Presbytery, seeing as we're in the same Presbytery, can the Legal Questions Committee look at this and develop this as a further development on the journey of readership, to develop what the readership can and cannot do? Thank you, convener.
We haven't a deliverance on this, so it's simply if you want to make a comment one way or the other to reassure Lynn or otherwise.
Well, I do, Moderator. I'm not sure that it's going to come as terribly reassuring, but my colleague, Catherine Taylor, led the group which looked, I think commissioners will agree, really quite extensively at this matter. This is not simply about practice within the church. It touches upon state law and would require parliamentary change to that legislation, not only for that reason, but for that reason too, and for the matters of principle outlined in section 8 in the report, which is still in my version. I'm not sure why it should have disappeared in others. I would resist any move to look at this further. I think that Legal Questions has looked at this sufficiently and perhaps even exhaustively for the time being.
Okay, thank you for that, convener, and thank you for raising the question, Mrs. Robertson. Right, the deliverance as a whole and online. Convener. Before I say something to you, I want to say to your committee that the fact that you have helped us to get through the business quickly does not minimise the importance with which we treat the Legal Question Committee, and your service with your committee to the church is greatly respected, and we're very grateful for it. I also want to say the words I'm about to say, and I want to say this specifically, come from Sally, the current moderator, rather than myself, because she's crafted them, and I think therefore they'll be received better for that. Grant, you bring your sharp focus and clear navigating skills to bear on every issue that comes to you. You also manage to bring good humour and calm to complex questions that would have many of us getting a wee bit grumpy. Thank you for being willing to share your time and expertise so generously. You have served the Kirk in many capacities: council and committee convener, parish minister, presbytery clerk, the list goes on. As you complete your term as convener of the Legal Questions Committee, know you go with our gratitude, affection, and admiration. Try not to fill the void too soon, but rediscover the joy of a wee bit of downtime, a day in the garden, or reading another chapter of your newest favourite book, or a long, leisurely chat with the family. When the procurator was being thanked, she talked about one of the skills you needed to have was faith, hope, and clarity. And I think you are an embodiment of those who in your ministry have encouraged us to faith, have given us hope, and in this area have served us with clarity. And that's all my comment to you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Barclay, for your time as convener.